This is the Dover Download Podcast. My name is Christopher Parker, and for the past 25 years, I've had the pleasure of working with, learning from, and talking to a variety of volunteer, staff, and community members. This podcast explores conversations, activities, and a variety of policies and programs which exist here in Dover to improve the community in one way or another. Annually, the city recognizes 9/11 and the anniversary of the events that occurred in 2001. This year, during that recognition, Mayor Carrier announced an initiative to create a memorial for the 25th anniversary of the 9/11 incident in 2026. Today, I'm joined by Police Chief Dave Terlemezian and Fire Chief Perry Plummer to talk about where that initiative has gone and the committee that's been formed around it. Gentlemen, welcome.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having us on.
Thank you. So, you're both here representing the committee. There's probably 10 of us on the committee. Obviously, we don't have 10 microphones, so we selected the two of you. But you're also representing the charity arms of your various departments. You want to tell us a little bit about those activities and baseline for the conversation ahead?
Sure. I could start with Dover Police Charities. We committed $1,000 to this effort because we feel strongly that a permanent memorial somewhere in the downtown is a wonderful idea, and it's an important thing to recognize not only the events of that day, but what's occurred since then. And while 25 years is a long time in a lot of people's minds, it's not that long and when you're talking about a major historical event. And the big thing for me with this is, yes, there were a whole bunch of people that were affected that day, but there's also been a ton of military activity that's taken place, a couple of wars that have taken place, and I don't know how we could quantify the number of lives that have been affected by 9/11. And we're talking about people that weren't even born that day. So the idea of a perpetual memorial is, I think it's really, really important. And that's why we're trying to get involved.
You know, certainly 9/11 changed the world. There's no question about it. But it certainly changed the world for first responders and the fire service. I mean, losing 343 firefighters that day obviously is a huge number. Thousands more have lost their lives from cancer from working at 9/11. We've learned so much from them. But the fire service after that became better funded, better equipped, more education on some of those items. And it really changed the face of the fire service. So, you know, we recognize 9/11 every day when we go to work. We have stickers on the side of our fire trucks that say never forget, that were designed by a Dover firefighter and that went nationally. And quite frankly, you know, we have a flag in our kitchen that has the names of every police, fire and EMS provider that were killed that day, and it hangs in our kitchen. So you can't go in our firehouse and not remember 9/11 and the tragic events that happened. And, you know, I think that all of us have been touched by it in some way. So, you know, certainly a memorial in the city of Dover is a great thing, you know, to recognize, you know, the history of it. But, you know, I'm to the age where obviously I remember everything that happened that day. I remember where I was. But certainly it's with 25 years, there's people that don't even really understand the background behind it and stuff. So one of the things that I think that the mayor said that I think was really a good point and probably a defining moment was he wanted to make this memorial field trip worthy. And I think that really says a lot about what we want to do with this committee, what we want to do with the memorial and the lasting effect that it has. So it's a perfect time, the 25th anniversary. Every year we have some type of memorial. We read the names and we say we'll never forget. Well, people are forgetting. And so I think that this is a perfect way to bring back that thought process, bring back the history, remember the people that got lost, and move forward with the things that changed since then. If you remember right after 9/11, patriotism was up, unity was up. Hopefully this memorial brings some of those things back as well as teaches the next generation the history of 9/11, what it meant to our country, what it meant to us as Americans, and how it's changed the future.
One of the reasons I think it's imperative that we do this is because of the fact that we're going to recognize the 4 individuals who perished that had connections to Dover at the time. And I think it's important as we developed this mission and vision for the ultimate memorial that we are going to capture that and reinforce, as you've both talked about, the need to remember those individuals as well as the global impact and the both the macro and the micro fallout of this event.
And we certainly hope that we have that solemn remembrance because, obviously the people that lost their life deserve that. But we hope so it's a springboard to think about the unity of our country and that patriotism and what it means to be an American. What do we want to do with this memorial? Where do we want to go? And we really hope that it's a focus piece that if someone wants to remember it in solitude, then they can come and sit and remember and think. But certainly it'll raise questions and have people want to come and see the history and those types of things. So hopefully it'll be a centerpiece for downtown and it'll bring people down to look at it, and then a great place to do the memorial every year. And we won't forget, because never forgetting means never forgetting.
One of the important aspects, I think, as well, is that while the three of us are municipal employees and there are other municipal employees on the committee, it's a community effort, and there are residents that are involved and participating. The mayor is leading the group at this point. And I think it's important to remember it's a community effort, it's a community remembrance. And I think that will be reflective in the design and the layout, and to the point where I don't think we can say exactly where it'll be located, but you're right, it is going to be downtown. We have a good conversation with a private property owner about locating it in a visible and accessible location. Chief Terlemezian, that was an important consideration, correct?
Yeah, it was the leading consideration. We talked about city property. We talked about areas to place the memorial where maybe that were adjacent to other areas or adjacent to city buildings. And the potential for the memorial to be a gathering spot for annual remembrances was front of mind when we were trying to figure out where this great solemn memorial could go. So that's been the leading consideration. That's why a downtown location, which will likely turn out to be, is key without question.
Chief Plummer, these sorts of things don't happen overnight. What kind of time frame are we looking at here?
Yeah, so, first and foremost, I'm so impressed and proud of the members of the police department and the members of the fire department who stepped up as soon as the mayor wanted to announce that he wanted to do this. Both charities were in. They did a kickoff. Both police charities and the Dover Firefighters Charities Charitable Association jumped right to it, and they've been on the committee. So it was great to see them, move forward with this. So our timeline is obviously, our back-end deadline is the 25th anniversary of 9/11, which was next year. So when we worked our way back from there, they're doing the design work right now. We're looking to have groundbreaking April 1st and then work through and have it about September 1st, have it be done ready for the, unveiling on September 11th. With that being said, the designing is difficult. The building it is difficult. But really, the number one thing that we're doing right now as a committee, and we need all the help we can get, is raising the money for it. We're thinking that this is about an $80,000 budget, and we're looking at fundraising for all of that, if possible, to try to make this thing a reality. We've had great response so far. We're looking to have it 50% funded by April 1st, and then have the rest of it funded by the end of June. So we're putting a full court press right now to reach out to people who believe in this, want to support this, and there's opportunities for businesses to get involved in this. And hopefully the city will come together and the citizens will come together to fund this and come a reality.
So to your point about fundraising and about getting involved, if someone's listening and they want to get involved, they can go to dovernh911memorial.org and get more information, and there'll be a GoFundMe link from there to our charitable process as well.
And they could certainly always reach out to Terlemezian and myself, and we could get them headed in the right direction as well.
One of the things while we're talking about sponsorship is Chief Plummer's come up with some different levels of sponsorship that have recognition tied to them. And while I won't read through the whole thing, one of the things that we're hoping for, and sometimes happens in the fundraising realm, is a little bit of healthy competition. So if you want to be a platinum sponsor, that's a $10,000 check. We'd like to have a couple of platinum sponsors. A gold level sponsor is $5,000. Silver level sponsor is $2,500, and bronze is $1,000. Of course, we will take any amount. It's all appreciated at the community level. And I think that this is one of those things where a lot of people personally, out of their own checkbooks, and certainly a lot of businesses, are going to want to be part of.
I think you're right. I think there's going to be a lot of pride and a lot of opportunity to be thankful and to visit the site, and whether it is as a field trip or one-on-one or the annual remembrance, I think that the way we've talked about it, it'll be appropriate at all three scales. It really will have a nice reflective element, but also an educational element and a element that allows you to think back on where you were that day and remember all of those changes, as you said, Chief Terlemezian, that have occurred since then.
On the subject of where we were that day, and thinking about this podcast in advance, I've told the story many times, and it's coincidental that the Dover Police Charities is involved in this effort from the ground up, because on September 11, 2001 was our annual Dover Police Charities golf tournament. So we were putting on a fundraiser at the Cachiko Country Club when that happened. And if we think back to 2001, the internet was young.
Yeah.
Smartphones were essentially non-existent. So the information age that we're in now, where you get everything instantaneously, was incredibly difficult to come by at the time. And the Charities golf tournament is made up of a lot of law enforcement at all different levels. And we were all, like the rest of the world, craving information, craving facts. It went from a plane crash into a building in New York City. You're picturing a small plane crashing into a building in New York City, not the tragedy on the scale that it ended up being. And then as the day progressed and you were able to maybe take a break and pass through the clubhouse where our television was on, it was only then that we were able to really appreciate the magnitude of it. And the day ended. It was a gorgeous day, perfect day for golf, and a terrible day, really nationally and eventually worldwide. So as the day goes on, people drop off from the dinner. It's usually a well-attended event, but some people had to go to work, and the rest of us just wanted to get home to our families. And that is what sticks with me. The other part is a little bit more personal. I got my wisdom teeth out, I think the following day or 2 days after. The surgeon that took my teeth out had been a surgeon for the New York City Police Department. Apparently that's a thing in New York City. They have or had at the time oral surgeons on staff, and he was retired from that. And so he had an interesting perspective.
Really?
I had my perspective, and being laid up for a little while, recovering from surgery, I probably watched more news coverage than I should have, because it ended up being overwhelming, really.
It's amazing how it changed everybody's lives in different ways. I mean, for me, it created some of my career. I became the director of Homeland Security for the state of New Hampshire for 6 years, and that was a direct result of 9/11. And, obviously getting out there and fighting the world on terror and things, you heard everything about 9/11. Every meeting I was in linked back to 9/11 for years. Unfortunately, I get to see or hear more than I ever wanted to know. And then even just recently, we had Battalion Chief John Selka from the FDNY at our location doing training, and he was at 9/11 and talking about some of those stories and, the people that got lost and the people that got saved because, they took a phone call and were second due in rather than third due in or something. It was really an interesting conversation. But it really rocked this nation, and it continues to rock this nation when we talk about it. And we just don't want to lose that history and that remembrance of it because it was so significant. And I think this will really bring it back in some solemn ways, but in some good ways as well.
I remember I was on my honeymoon and we were doing a tour of New England, and that day we were in Wolfboro. I was in line to buy tickets to the Mount Washington to go on Winnipesaukee and watch the Today Show was on in the background at the ticket counter, and my wife was in one of the other stores at Wolfboro, and we both came to each other. We were like, "Did you just see?" And we, like everyone else, you don't know what to do at that moment. And on the one hand, you feel guilty about being on your honeymoon. On the other hand, what else are you going to do? And we continued the day, but we came back, and you're right, Chief. Both of you are right. But the family aspect, the wanting to be with people you loved and people you cared for. And then we had the memorial here in Dover, the gathering at Henry Law Park, that I think was a really good, to your point, Chief Plummer, about patriotism. It also was a unifier. It was a community builder inadvertently. I think that hopefully part of what we're going to be able to instill in the memorial we're looking to create is to recapture some of that.
I remember one of the 9/11, because obviously I was fire chief here when the 9/11 happened, and we did a couple of memorials and over the year, and one was at the church on Hale Street, and then one was in the courtyard downtown. And I remember looking at the sea of blue and saluting, but looking in the crowd, everybody had an American flag. Every single person was holding an American flag. And I don't know if I've seen that sense anywhere outside of 9/11 memorials and stuff. And unfortunately, that's fading a little bit, but it would be great to see that for the 25th anniversary, every single citizen standing there with an American flag.
You stole my thought, because as you were beginning to talk and you mentioned patriotism and coming together, like, there's two things that come to mind for me in the police service. The first is, the American flags. Like, where did all those flags go? Because there were just so many. And the other is, one of the barometers of police work sometimes is how many waves you get as you drive down the street in a police cruiser, right? So that there's X number that are always going to wave at a police car. But we got an awful lot more waves and head nods and recognition in the days and months following that. Because again, when that selflessness, yes, it pales in comparison to what firefighters did that day, but many police officers lost their lives. Many have lost their lives since then. And they were running into those buildings together, and they were doing everything they could to get people safe together without thought. Without the selflessness on display is rarely seen on a scale like that, thankfully, but it's rarely seen.
And they, speaking for those first responders and, have a lot of training since then, listening to them talk and everything. I'm not sure one of those first responders didn't know the consequences that were going to happen.
Sure.
And I remember doing a talk in a class, and the question came up was, well, if it was today, how many of those 343 firefighters would be killed? And I said, probably 343, because they went in there knowing what the consequences were, and they would today. With that being said, and I know I said it at this year's memorial, I want to remember the 343 and the police officers that were killed, and the EMS providers killed, and all the citizens. But I also want to remember they saved 20,000 lives. So they invested 343, but they saved 20,000 lives. And that's a number I hope that we all can remember, that the 20,000 lives that they saved, and all the families that were affected by that in a good way.
The remembrance aspect of it, in some ways, it's like Pearl Harbor Day. December 7th is a day we should all stop, take a deep sigh of breath, and think back and remember those that were saved and those that perished. And I think that 9/11 has a very similar connotation for, let's say, our generation, those that didn't actively participate in Pearl Harbor Day.
And that wraps back to what I said at the beginning, right? So Pearl Harbor was the kickoff to America's involvement in World War II, or America's direct involvement in World War II, and everything that came from that militarily, veteran status, the greatest generation, all that. So that's what happened here for us, for those of us in the generation that were, either young adults or, and then the many, many people that were pressed into military service as a direct result of that. So it does really wrap back to a huge national tragedy like Pearl Harbor.
And I think that, I know I speak for all of us when we say thank you to every veteran that's out there right now and who's been fighting that war on terror for 25 years and continues today. And it's funny, I was talking to someone, I said, thank you for your service. And they came in and I said, look, I never forget the fact that I can do what I do every day, the fun stuff, the not fun stuff, everything I do, I never forget. It's because those people are putting their lives on the line every single day. And I think this will bring that back a little bit to them, to us, to remind that this war on terror goes on every single day and people are risking their lives and dying every single day so we can go down the street and have a cup of coffee without worrying about it, or, having children, letting them go to school and sports and all the things that we get to do because they sacrifice for us.
Well, I appreciate you both coming in and talking about this, and I look forward to the continued fundraising, the continued design activities. We'll be putting stuff on the website I mentioned earlier as we have more design information, and certainly, Chief Plummer, as you said, if people have questions, they should reach out and participate, and we look forward to that groundbreaking and the final celebration of the memorial being complete in 2026. Have a great day. With October behind us, it's time to recap what our boards, commissions, and committees did this month. Here with Brian Early and Aaron Bassegio to talk about our land use world and our not land use world, really. Brian, what went on the City Council's docket this month?
The City Council took 2 actions regarding the Emergency Warming Center in October. First, the council reauthorized working with Stratford County, Somersworth, and Rochester to operate the Emergency Cold Weather Warming Center on Willen Drive in Somersworth. This is expected to be the last year using the building, which the city of Dover owns. The second action was signing on to an agreement with the same entities, Somersworth, Rochester, and Stratford County, to build a seasonal warming center at the Stratford County complex in Dover. There are still quite a few details to be worked out, but the goal is to have it operational next year.
I think it's good to put a point on that last item you mentioned, that it's early in that process. All that's been agreed to is to investigate how that would operate. The county has done some preliminary conceptual designs for a building, needs to get costs. All those costs and the responsible elements need to come back to the city councils of the three communities as well as Stratford County delegation. So I want to just reinforce for the listener that this is one step in a multi-step process.
Right. No money's been authorized.
Correct. Great point.
The city council also authorized the city manager to negotiate, finalize, and execute the waterfront development project's Phase 2 public improvements agreement. And Chris, what is the Phase 2 going to entail?
So Phase 2 is a singular building known as Building F on the site plan. And that is a 43-unit building that went to the planning board earlier this summer, Aaron, right? They got approval to do an amendment to that. The location, building footprint got a little bit bigger. But that Phase 2 is early in the sense that, according to the contracts we have with Cathartis, they don't need to buy it and develop it for another year. They came forward to us and said they want to expedite the purchase. That means that some of the areas such as the park and things like that aren't complete, we had to sign this agreement for their bank, indicating that we do plan on following through on our obligations, even though they are taking possession early.
And there's still future agreements beyond this, correct?
So there's a Phase 3, which is buildings A and B, which are located closer to the intersection of Payne Street and Seaport Way.
Now, the city council also started the capital improvements program for the 2027 fiscal year, which includes planned capital projects over the next 6 fiscal years. There was a joint workshop with, as there always is, with the city council and the planning board. And as Aaron mentioned, the planning board had a public hearing on the capital improvements project. And the October meeting, the city council will hold one at their November 12th meeting. Now, CIP includes 3 resolutions adopting the 6-year document as a whole, approving the fiscal year 27 capital reserved fund appropriations for non-debt finance projects, and authorizing appropriation for bonding for fiscal year 27 debt finance projects. The CIP's first-year projects and appropriations will become part of the fiscal year 27 municipal budget that the city manager will present to the city council in February.
For listeners who don't listen in order and skip around, they might want to go back maybe 2 episodes and check out a more in-depth conversation about the CIP that we had with Planning Director Donna Benton. Wrapping up what happened before the city council and moving on to what's going for our land use boards. Aaron, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm peachy.
I'll start with planning board. There were 2 meetings in the month of October. The first one was a relatively quick meeting for planning board. There was an approval of a CUP for wetland buffer impacts for a residential addition on 6th Street that had previously been endorsed by the Conservation Commission a couple of months ago.
And a CUP is a conditional use permit?
That's correct, conditional use permit. And the other approval was an amendment to a TDR subdivision plan. There were a few homes that were part of that development on Sophie and Banner Drive that had a size restriction. This was part of the TDR approval to begin with, and they were requesting that size restriction be removed. That was approved by the board, but that also involves paying a remainder of TDR fees, as well as updating not only the property deeds, but HOA documents for that development. So there's still a couple of steps with that approval.
So to back up just a tad, the transfer development rights ordinance allows the planning board to approve various degrees of unit size, and you get a reduced cost if you agree to do a smaller unit, because smaller units tend to be resold or rented for less. So in this case, the developer came forward and said, these units that were going to be smaller, we want to make them not size restricted, more market rate, market sized. And so they're paying the difference. And it's not a small or insignificant difference, correct?
It's not. And this request was kind of specific to the families that now live in the homes that actually just wanted to finish their basements. And it was a very specific request to these individual situations, families that wanted a little more space in their homes to be finished. And so, again, that was approved just for those units that were requesting it.
Great.
Also, the board voted on posting 2 different amendment proposals, one to Chapter 153, which is our site review, and 157, which is our subdivision regulations. Both amendments were in response to a state change extending approval timelines for plans. So the city was looking at our own regulations and wanting to update those to match.
Those are the type of amendments that when I was a planning director, we would have called the housekeeping, particularly because we have no say. The state law is going to trump municipal law requiring those dates.
Exactly. So either way, that would have been what we had to follow. This just makes sure that our local regulations is matching the language.
Yeah.
And the second meeting in October, as Brian talked about, the planning board held a public hearing on the capital improvements program, heard a little bit more about it, and voted for recommendation. And they also heard another conditional use permit, or CUP, for this was actually non-environmental. This was for a front build-to line request for some dimensional relief for a single-family home that is being requested to be built on Portland Ave. Another CUP, this one was actually heard from the Conservation Commission this month at 13.5 Boston Harbor Road. This one's kind of interesting because the applicant is requesting to raise their home because they're in the flood zone. And part of that is a small amount of impacts to the conservation district. So it's kind of an interesting CUP that I haven't seen yet. And the board Conservation Commission first moved to endorse the application, and Planning Board voted to approve it. There was a minor subdivision on 19 Watson Road. And finally, a site plan at 206th Street. This is a proposal for a Comcast switching facility. And it's an unmanned site, very little traffic in and out on the site. And it should be set back with plenty of screening that people won't even notice it's there. And finally, the 2 amendments that I just mentioned were another public hearing was held and voted to adopt.
Speaking of public hearings, I think it's worth noting a mixture of something you and Brian just mentioned. City Council will be holding its public hearing, or a public hearing, I should say, on the capital improvements program on those 3 resolutions Brian mentioned earlier at its November 12th meeting. And so certainly we encourage people to come and participate in that. And as listeners can probably tell, the library renovation is going on as we speak. And we'll have Denise LaFrance in soon to talk about where that is and what's going on. Brian, anything to wrap us up?
For the CIP, there is a button on the homepage that people can access if you want to see what's in the plan. It has access to this year and previous year's fiscal year CIPs. One item the school board discussed in October was the need to pay an additional $1.7 million to school care to help restore the school care's claim reserves. School Care is a New Hampshire-based pool risk management organization that allows public entities such as the Dover School District to self-insure for expenses like health coverage. And this need for additional money was not accounted for in the district's current budget, but Superintendent Christine Boston and Chief Financial Officer Michael Lamani believe they can make budget adjustments to account for this unanticipated expense, and it's not going to affect any healthcare coverage for any of the district employees, teachers, and what have you.
Briefly, for other boards and commissions, before I turn back to Aaron to talk about any other land use boards, I want to mention that the Waterfront Committee met in October, first time they had met since June. And part of that meeting was to review options and opportunities for long-term operation and maintenance of Nevy Park. It's going to be the most complex and diverse park we have here in the community, and so it's going to need special care. And so John Storer, our Community Services Director, walked Quiddick through what that's going to look like. And then the board reviewed a video, which is now online and you can view from the Waterfront website, about what it's like to walk through the site. Jamie Stevens, our project manager, narrates and in some ways walks people through the various elements, stormwater, landscape, private construction, and otherwise. So if you want to see what you can experience for yourself in May or June of 2026, feel free to watch the video. Erin, bring us home.
Just a few more items. I mentioned the CUP that was reviewed and endorsed by Conservation Commission. I'd also mentioned that the commission heard a pretty thorough presentation by one of the members, Russ Warnock, on the ash trees downtown. He did a full inventory on kind of dying and dead ash trees that will need to be replaced over the couple of the years. So they got a lot of detail and, it's going to be helpful in planning that replacement over the next couple of years. The ZBA met this month and they approved a special exception. This was for a home that's currently 3 units at Mount Vernon Street, and they were requesting an additional unit by special exception, and that was approved. And the Master Plan Steering Committee met again this month. I believe it will be their final meeting to review not only the draft of the chapter, but the action items that have been and possible recommendations that have been drafted as part of the chapter. I also reviewed outreach that's been done for the chapter, and kind of the next steps is taking all that feedback into the draft to make sure we get a more complete final version to then present to planning board for hopeful adoption over the next couple of months.
Cool. Appreciate you both coming down and filling us all in on what happened this month. Have a great day. Thanks for listening to the Dover Download this week. If you like what you heard, subscribe through your favorite podcast aggregator. And if you have something you want to hear a topic on, let us know. Finally, this is just one of the many ways we share information about the city of Dover. You can subscribe to the Dover Downloads email newsletter every week or other newsletters that we have by going to the City of Dover homepage, www.dover.nh.gov. Have a great week.